In this episode, we are going to be reviewing The Shining, which was released in 1980, and it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. It starred Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, and Scatman Crothers. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories were told on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I want to welcome to the show for the first time, David B. Harrington, who is a YouTuber, and his channel is called Film Collector Archive. David, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Robert. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm a longtime admirer of your channel and your content, so great to be here.
No, thanks so much. I appreciate that, and I'm excited to talk about the Shining because I have a sort of complicated relationship with Kubrick's films, conflicting relationship with Kubrick's films. But I wanted to ask you off the top. I mean, I know this is a film you love. You got the shirt there. You got the great. There we go. We got the great poster in the background. I love it. Do you remember the first time you saw this film and how you took to it? And did you take to it immediately, or what was your first viewing like?
Yeah, so The Shining, I have a long history with this film, dating back to my high school years, which is actually when I first saw the film. So a bunch of friends got together, as you do in high school, just to watch a movie or whatever, hang out. And so one of my friends had proposed the idea of The Shining. And at that point, film has been a part of my life for my entire life, but I hadn't come across Kubrick's work yet at that point, and so this was just a first time Kubrick watch for me. And to answer your question, I connected with the film immediately. It did so many things for me as a moviegoer that other films didn't seem to do. It just immediately felt more like there was more depth to what I was watching. There was I had more questions than I had, with other films that I was watching at the time, and so yeah, it was a really engaging experience. And I remember just the memory of watching it with the friends that I did. There's just great, I guess, nostalgia for that, because now this will age me, I guess, but I mean, that was over 20 years ago, that I watched the film for the first time. So late 90s was when I saw it for the first time. But yeah, I immediately connected with it, and it's still a film that I watch on a regular basis today.
Well, you said something interesting, which is, that his films are full of questions. And I think that's really true, because his films don't give you answers. They're really, they really are often ambiguous and full of mystery. And this is a film that every time you see it, you can see something else in it or take something away from it, that some kind of a question that the film is posing that perhaps you didn't ask yourself before. So what, when you see this film, what do you think? Because it's so different from the novel, and I know we can get into that. But what do you think Kubrick was after here? I mean, what do you think this film is about? Is it just, a ghost story, or what is it to you?
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off of your comment, I love the level of ambiguity that Kubrick brings to his work, because as I've kind of traversed the path of film and try and get more experience with different films and filmmakers, I tend to appreciate not getting the answers.
Me too.
And just, I think there's a level of respect that a filmmaker has for their audience when they don't spoon feed you the answers. And so
absolutely, yeah.
And certainly the first time I watched the film, I was so puzzled in the best way. But I think and I guess we'll obviously get into spoilers here. If you haven't seen the film, go watch it.
Yeah, no, I'm all
But
spoilers on my channel.
especially with the picture of Jack at the end, as the
Yes.
cameras panning down the hallway,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh my gosh,
What is
what does
that?
this
Yeah.
mean? Because in a more literal sense, it doesn't, the picture obviously doesn't make sense
Right.
if you're viewing the film a certain way, and so it brought up questions. And to wrap back around to your question, um Stephen King's book, now I've read the book a couple of times, but it's admittedly been a little while since I've read it, so I can't comment a whole ton on the book. But I've read it a couple of times, and King's book seems to be more of a ghost story
Right.
than the film. The film, if I had to pick a central theme, I really think the central theme is family.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
we're presented, and now my favorite opening shot in cinema history is the opening sequence of The Shining.
Yeah.
And if you do a little bit of research, the opening theme, or the song, is Dies Irae, which translated roughly means Day of Wrath.
Right.
So this is used in the Roman rite requiem, or the funeral proceedings within that culture. And so that tells you something immediately. Kubrick's already communicating with his audience on this opening shot, because we get this beautiful landscape, of course, as we make our way up to the Overlook Hotel. But over top of that, we have this this really haunting
Yeah.
theme playing, and
It really
it just
transforms the image, that
it
because without that song, it just looks like a landscape,
well, and it's
a
this
beautiful landscape.
and it's this juxtaposition of this haunting, almost ghost like feeling to this beautiful landscape, and you just immediately think, okay, I'm in for something
Mm-hmm,
here.
mm-hmm.
And then you have the of course, the voices that seem to emanate through the music as well. And we can get into that a little bit, some of the potential meanings of the film. But we have this symbol of kind of death and despair and impending doom, that's with this Dies Irae, with this song, which, by the way, is used quite a bit throughout film history. This is not exclusive
Yes.
to The Shining.
Right.
But what is exclusive to The Shining is the work of Wendy Carlos, who is
Yes. I'm glad
the
you brought her
composer,
up.
and she is one of the pioneers of electronic music.
Yeah.
If any of your audience, if anyone does not know the name Wendy Carlos, start your research right now, because this is one of the pioneers of electronic music. And the synthesizer.
There's a feature. See, I have this Blu-ray, the little box set.
Yeah,
It's probably on the one you have, and there's a 7-minute featurette, and she shows how she composed the music.
and
It's
it,
very inventive. Like it's really unique.
oh yeah, and it's all too short, isn't it?
Very short. Yeah, it's a shame, but
the I mean, I could listen to her talk and explain her process for
yeah,
hours.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but she utilizes, and I apologize, I should have written this down. It's basically a synthesizer, but I think there was a specific name for the instrument that she was using.
Yeah,
Um, but it is just the mood that it establishes, her music establishes with the film, is just absolutely critical.
oh
And
yeah, yeah,
really, really, in two specific moments, the opening shot, and then on so there's different headers throughout the film, and so it's closing day is the header, and then it has that overhead through the canyon shot of when they're, as a family, they're making their way up to the
right.
hotel. That the music there, as it's kind of going down through the mountains, and you're kind of going through the fog or the mist, and
Yeah,
making your way down that specific song right there as well is just, I mean, it makes the hair back on my neck, just stand up, because it's so engaging, and it's just such a distinct feel.
Yeah.
Now, because Wendy Carlos, she actually, that was not her only foray with Kubrick. She contributed on A Clockwork Orange as well.
That's right.
And then there's The Shining, and then also, and I actually did not know this, Tron, which
Oh, I didn't know
makes
that either.
which makes all too much sense because of the whole electronic, kind of music. And
Right.
then more recently, Ready Player One with Spielberg's film.
Right.
And then she had Rachel Elkind was her partner as well in that in The Shining, and then also with Ready Player One. And so I know their careers dovetailed a little bit, but anyways, yeah, Wendy Carlos is definitely a name to look into, and
Yeah.
just amazing.
Yeah, no, she's, he reminds me of his films. Kubrick remind me of Hitchcock's in a way, because when you take out like someone like Bernard Herrmann's score out of Psycho, then the film
Yeah,
is not nearly as effective. And Kubrick's films, pretty much all of them without those scores, Clockwork Orange, Eyes Wide Shut, without these scores that are so, that they're almost like a character, in the film. They grab
sure.
the audience by the throat and they transform the image. Now you said something interesting, and I agree, which is that the film is really, I suppose the essence of the story is about family. And what is deeply disturbing and cynical about this film is that I really see it, and people probably likely have all kinds of different interpretations, but I really see it as a man who hates his family from the beginning. I mean, he's
Yeah,
hostile in the car towards his wife and child immediately, and when the son says dad, and then Nicholson looks miserable in the car, he hesitates and he's like, yes.
yeah,
And his son, he tells him all about cannibalism. Like, it's sort of like he doesn't even think that may be scary, and I know his son Danny says, oh, I know all about it, and then he just kind of like smiles. So he doesn't seem to take his family very, very seriously. And I know that the book now, in Stephen King was very angry about the way that this film was adapted, because the book
yeah,
was about a good man who loves his family but had a problem with alcohol. And so of course the house and the supernatural forces were more of a metaphor for the self-destructive nature of what alcohol can do to yourself and can do to people around you, which makes sense. And Kubrick sort of just flips that, because we don't see any of that. We don't see any goodness in him. From the top, he's like I said, he's very hostile, and I don't see the house or the supernatural forces that happen transforming him. I see it more as just bringing him deeper into those impulses he had, which was to perhaps, I mean, you don't know whether he was planning on killing his family or not, but just taking his hatred towards his family, or maybe he doesn't hate them, but perhaps that he's not comfortable being a family man, just from that first scene anyways. And sort of if there's any transformation, it's to sort of to get rid of them, and so this is what all the supernatural forces are doing to him. So I really, I know the co-screenwriter said that as well. It's like the film is almost like a death wish. It's almost as if he wants to get rid of his family, but perhaps the only indication that he may feel guilty about that or hate himself for it is the nightmare scene. When he has this nightmare that he kills his family, and his wife Wendy's waking him up, and he's so distraught about it. But every other scene, when he says he loves Danny, and I thought Nicholson performed it beautifully, like especially the scene where Danny's on his lap and he's like, "You would never hurt us, Danny," and he's like, I would never do it. But he's saying one thing, but his reaction is saying something totally different.
And you'll recall in that scene as well, he confronts Danny on that issue, and he says, "Did your mother tell you that I would hurt you?" And because really you can go, like you bring up the scene in the car when they're making their way up to the hotel. You can even go before that in the film. Really, Jack is established as an issue when Wendy is discussing Danny's physical, reaction that he had, and Wendy is discussing with the doctor the issue of Jack breaking Danny's arm, or that issue that came up and how that was related to his alcoholism, and he hasn't had a drop since, but he's established immediately as an issue to his family. And so in that regard, it's different than Stephen King's book, because it's in King's book, it's maybe more of a descent into madness, where
it's more empathetic towards. I mean, just from, I haven't read the book, but from hearing what the book is about, it's more about, like I said, he's a guy who loves his family. He's a good man, but the alcohol is what was destroying him, and writer's block and stuff, stuff like that. So but again, in the film, like, he's just, there's nothing that Kubrick is not trying to make you feel for him. He's basically saying that the guy is pure evil, and the house is bringing him further and further and further to well, again, I shouldn't say that he's pure evil from the beginning, but that the supernatural forces are bringing him into these impulses, which are to destroy himself and destroy, and kill the family, which fortunately he doesn't succeed at in the end.
Well, and it brings up this there's kind of questions for me that come up all the way throughout, and you bring up him having the dream or the nightmare of killing his family, and he communicates that with Wendy, and we know Danny has some experience in room 237, which in the book, just as a side note, in the book it's room 217, in the film it's 237, but anyways, it raises the question of what sequences in the film are grounded in reality and what is happening, because we have little visual cues that Kubrick throws in there, and it could 100% be that he just wanted to mess with the audience, but there's visual cues in there that what we're looking at is not actually happening, because we have, for instance, in the kitchen, Dick Halloran is showing the Wendy and Danny around, and then Jack has the experience in there when Wendy puts him in the refrigeration area and locks him in there. The Calumet canisters that are on the shelf, there's a graphic of an American Indian, or just a graphic on the can, and at one point that's facing forward, and then the camera goes one direction and back, and it's turned.
I didn't even notice that.
We have Jack next to his typewriter in conversation with Wendy, and behind Jack in the shot there's a chair up against the wall. Again, we leave that shot and we come back and the chair's gone. There's little visual cues like this that say you can't trust what you're seeing.
Exactly.
So I think that contributes a lot to the ambiguity of what is or what is not.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because usually I remember when I was in college, I had one of the classes was a creative writing class, and so we would like write different stories every week. And I wrote a story that was the whole thing was a nightmare, and the teacher said, "Well, you have to." Well, I don't remember if he said have to, but he said you should perhaps have had some sense of reality so that the audience knew what was reality and not. And, being 18 or 19 at the time, I took his word for it. But now I look back in that and I say, well, why? Why do you have to? Why can't it be ambiguous? Why can't you leave it mysterious or up to the audience? And what's interesting is that, it would be one thing if the film was totally from Jack's point of view. You may have felt you were just in his head or that it was a dream, but it's also Danny's point of view. It's also Wendy's point of view. It's also what's the man who Jack kills?
Dick Halloran.
Dick Halloran. Dick. Actually, he's fantastic. That guy, Scatman Crothers.
Scatman Crothers.
It's all these different point of views. So, again, if it would be one thing if it was Jack, because then the audience may lean more towards it being possibly his point of view, but you really don't know. And that's why that ending is so great. The shot of Nicholson there from the 1920s. So to me, that was an indication that a possibility is that this whole thing, this whole surrealist nightmare is like a glimpse of hell. Like, to me, I don't even think any of it is necessarily here on Earth. I see the whole film as being sort of a glimpse of hell. And Kubrick, I love this conversation he had with Stephen King. And I think he had said this to Nicholson as well, where he felt that the film was optimistic because any story that tells you that there's ghosts means that there was have some kind of belief in the afterlife. And Stephen King had said, well, what about hell? How is that optimistic? And Kubrick paused for a long time and said, I don't believe in hell. And Stephen King said, well, a lot of people do. And this got Kubrick interested in the nature of hell. So perhaps the whole thing is just like Dante's Inferno. It's like Nicholson has already killed his family and he went to hell for it, and he's revisiting this what he did again and again and again and again. Perhaps he's paying for it. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, because I think something else that's at play here, we have kind of four main characters, if you will. We have Danny, we have Jack, we have Wendy, and we have Dick. So there's this, kind of circle of characters that's formed here. But I would suggest that one of those players there, Wendy, is outside of the circle, and there's a shared kind of consciousness between Danny, Dick, and Jack. And because clearly, as Dick is explaining to Danny, what his grandmother termed,
right, the Shinings,
yeah, there's it can be viewed as a gift that these people possess, but there's that kind of that lineage of the gift, if you will, where Danny has it, Jack, I think, clearly has it, and Dick has it as well. So I think there's this communication or this shared consciousness. So from those perspectives of those characters in the film, what one character is experiencing, the other two might be as well. So it forms kind of this world of what we're seeing occur. But Wendy is on the outside of this, and she's in this constant state of panic and in the more grounded reality of family relationships, she's panicking about what to do about Danny, what to do about her husband. She's clearly not knowing what to do with her husband because, the interactions that she has with him, she's shooed away, or she's looked at as an issue and something that's getting in his way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because Jack is, and in some of the commentaries or, thoughts that I've listened to on the film, Jack is, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, he's misusing the gift. whereas, Dick and Danny, they have communication, and Dick comes to the rescue, or
Yes.
attempts
Yeah.
to come to the rescue, which happens very differently in the book because he's actually able to fulfill the rescue, or
Oh, okay.
but in the film he clearly comes short because he gets an axe to the stomach,
Yes. Right
or to the
away.
chest.
It's like
Yeah.
within seconds, when he's in
And
that
so,
house, he's gone.
yeah, which, an interesting, just because we're talking about that right now, an interesting visual on that, as Dick enters the hotel. I've seen this film so many times, so I think about these things. As Dick enters the hotel, he's, the snow's up against the door, and he opens the door and he enters the hallway there, where he's basically, it's the walk to his death. You'll notice up on the ceiling, there's lights running down that hall that he's walking down, and all of the lights are off except for one. And it's right when he reaches that point in the hallway is when Jack comes out
Oh, wow. I didn't notice that.
with the axe. So if you go back to that scene and watch it, I'm like, oh, I always have to wonder. I'm like, okay, that's maybe a coincidence, but it's
Right.
interesting how that visual occurs. But I mean, that was really the walk to his death. But yeah, I think there's a shared, kind of consciousness there. And then Wendy's just on the outside, just kind of running all over the place. And she's going up the stairs. And of course we have the infamous, the bear suit
Yeah.
scene, which
Yeah.
is funny because I was listening, I was watching the film last night, just to kind of get some fresh thoughts. And I was listening specifically to the commentary by Garrett Brown and John Baxter. So
The
John Baxter is,
Steadicam operator.
yeah. So Garrett Brown is the Steadicam inventor
That's
slash
right.
operator, and then Garrett Brown is the Kubrick biographer. Garrett Brown with the with the Steadicam, that created a really specific feel in the film as well, where you felt like there was a ghost-like entity that was kind of following, like Danny,
Yeah.
especially Danny down the
Those
hallways with
hallways.
his,
Yeah.
yeah. And it does create this really smooth kind of path through the halls, and there's some points in the film where he's using a handheld cam, and so you feel much more like it's someone walking around. It's a handheld camera, but most of the time it's it feels like this ghost-like entity that's kind of showing us through the hotel. And
Yeah,
um
it certainly feels like I thought they utilized the Steadicam so well, because it certainly feels as though when Danny is on the bike and going down those hallways, it feels as though like almost like the house is that person behind him watching him, and every time he turns, you feel as though something's just gonna hit him or grab him, or something is after him. And every time he turns, you're like, what's going to be around that corner? And early on, it's nothing. But then, of course, later on, it's the two twins, which is to this day such a
yeah,
freaky shot.
yeah,
And of course, he's the one with all those premonitions. He can see what has happened or what is going to happen, or if something is happening, he can see it. Like when he's hiding, he doesn't see Dick get killed with the axe, but he knows it's happening because they keep cutting to him screaming. And even earlier, or at different parts of the films, he's not in the room, but he can hear all the conversations that his parents are having. And what's interesting about that is, I suppose, in a way, we as the audience are almost like, you know, we are Danny in a sense, because the film doesn't hide the fact that this is going to be one hell of a ride from the beginning. Like there's no hiding that it's a horror, having a build up, developing the characters, and then having the horror, where you perhaps don't see it coming. You from those first shots know, what is going to happen to these people. You
yeah,
find out that when Jack Torrance gets hired, they tell him immediately what happened in the house, how this the person who worked there, who was the caretaker, killed his kids and went crazy because of the isolation. You know that this is going to happen. You know that these things, and of course you're thinking, well, how bad is it going to be, or is anyone going to save them, or is anyone going to stop it, et cetera, et cetera. And so we, in a way, are like Danny, because Danny sees all these things coming too, the blood in the hallway, all those things. And I find that interesting, because I often hate when I can see what's coming, and I'm like, oh, okay, all these clues, I'm like, I just really, because it leaves, it gives the audience, too much comfort when you are, you could just put your feet up and you recognize an incident, and you can anticipate where something's going to go. And so it makes it too easy to watch. But in this case, it has that, but it's really sort of showing you that the characters in the story also see these things coming. So it's sort of reflecting back on the audience in a sense, because you see it coming, and so do these characters. So I don't know how well I'm articulating this, but it's sort of it sort of takes the comfort out of those kind of experiences which we have with movies often, and we're seeing characters now seeing the story, and so that's sort of like, it's just unusual, it's like, it's sort of like, it makes you uncomfortable, in a sense. It makes you feel like you're in the story, makes you feel like you're in the house. I don't know if anything that I'm saying resonates with you, but something I thought of.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot comes out in their performances, just because of the sheer exhaustion of filming with a director like Stanley Kubrick, because they made, again, Garrett Brown in this commentary was talking about how it was completely common practice for them to shoot a particular shot 40 times. Or 100 times.
He's known for that, of course, Stanley.
And so it just gets to the point where it's like takes 1 through 10, you're just kind of getting used to it. Takes 20 through 30, they start to get really good. By take 40, it's just madness, and that's and it, a lot of times too, it would be, Kubrick might even use that first take, but it's getting specific performances out of his actors. And
people have all kinds of theories on why he did so many takes. Some people think that he was just trying to exhaust the performers, that he was able to get something so real or vulnerable as a result. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, because as an actor myself, when you're exhausted, unless the scene is you breaking down crying, which actually you do see a lot of it in this film, and I mean, that can work, but having no energy does not work well for actors. But it the other alternative,
that's a good point.
But other people feel that he was open to the moment. He didn't necessarily know what he wanted. He was always discovering and searching. So, everybody's different. I know David Fincher does, also like 60 takes. He does a lot of takes. I really don't know why. So, and I'm conflicted as to whether that's a good idea or not. But at the same time, I admire that he doesn't go home until he feels he gets it right. That's very admirable, because he was a perfectionist, but he really deeply cared, and so if it's going to be 2 years, it's going to be 2 years. And I do admire that, which might not be the most fun to be in, to be around, but I do admire it in hindsight.
Well, and it's interesting too, because of the sheer amount of takes that they were performing, or that that he had them doing. I mean, it obviously pushed the shooting schedule out. And something really interesting to note is that the So the set that they built for the ballroom, it's, you know, really massive. That is actually the same set used in the Well of Souls from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
And
that.
Spielberg and his crew were waiting for them to wrap shooting so that they could come in and film Raiders.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so, and it became a thing where Kubrick and his crew, they pushed out Spielberg and his crew months because of the shooting schedule being pushed out so far. But yeah, it's just kind of funny to look at the, you know, you maybe don't quite look at the ballroom quite the same, knowing, oh wow, that's cool, that's the Well of Souls, you know, set, you know,
Right.
where the actual set was constructed. It's just kind of a cool uh you know, thing to
Bit of
consider.
trivia. Yeah.
Yeah, just because um you know, these filming schedules, you have, you know, specific, you know, a lot, and I don't work in film production, but I mean, there's the studio's looking at you to get something done in a specific amount of time, and then you have other, you know, film crews coming in, and I'm sure the, you know, there's politics and stuff that come in there that, you know, maybe Kubrick was an established enough director that he could, you know, make
Well,
that happen. But
that's the incredible thing about him, is that there is no other director. I mean, maybe there is, but I just offhand can't think of anyone who was someone. He was a part of the studio system. I mean, he was initially an independent filmmaker, but
yeah,
he got to a point where no one interfered with him, which is like unlike who I can't think of any other filmmaker. Doesn't matter how, you know, how successful one is, producers always come in if they feel that the director is doing too much. But for some reason, Kubrick was just someone that no one messed with. I know he was incredibly charming, and he knew how to get what he needed. But and also he had a good box office track record often. You
sure,
know, right up
yeah,
until, I know Barry Lyndon didn't do well, but most of his films, so the in the commercial sense, that may have been why. But it's interesting that he chose to do this film after Barry Lyndon, you know, because I wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that Barry Lyndon was not a commercial success, because here we have a horror film, which in a way, you know, the interesting thing about this film is that it plays on different levels. I mean, someone can be just enjoying it for the sake of the entertainment level, and not necessarily want to dive in and explore its themes and explore its meanings, and you know, all the visual motifs and all the things that we're talking about. But it's, you know, it's not a film that it's not a film that is sort of demands that. I mean, it does in a way, because either you're just enjoying it because of all the great, you know, thrills and horror, but surely it is still sort of like, you know, for anyone confusing, especially with that ending. But you know, people can walk away and not bother trying to figure it out, and still just be like, wow, that was
absolutely,
incredible. But
yeah,
so I wonder if he recognized that, but I don't think, you know, if he was going to spend 2 years on something, which he often does, or more. I mean, that doesn't even include, you know, the writing and all the pre-production. I don't think Kubrick was the kind of guy that just say, yeah, let's go make some money. You know, you know, no way. You know, he was not that tight. But it is interesting to see him do this, which was so different compared to Barry Lyndon. But then again, all his films are so different. So
yeah,
what was it about this story, which, you know, Stephen King criticized it for not having any substance, and I agree, when I read that, I agreed with King, but I don't think it's a film that is that has the substance that King was looking for, based on his book, which was to feel for the people, to empathize, to see the perhaps the realities of alcoholism within the supernatural film. I think it is. I think truly it is a real sort of cynical look at a guy who feels that his family is getting in the way of his writing career, perhaps, you see him in that scene with Wendy when when she just comes to say hello, and he's like, "You're distracting me. Get the fuck out of
Yeah.
here."
Yeah.
Here he is with his son with all these bruises, and she says, "Let's take him to a doctor," and he's totally against it. And I mean, who the hell else would do that? That of course is right before she hits him with the bat. So
Yeah.
why Kubrick found this interesting, I really don't know. It's again, it leaves the questions posed to why Kubrick wanted to do it, and the themes within those questions are also posed to us. I don't know if you ever gave that any thought, as to what was it about the story that would have interested him.
Yeah. It is interesting that this film does have the dual nature of being, and I don't recall exactly how it did at the box office, but a
I think it
potential.
did quite well. I know the reviews were mixed.
Yeah, but I mean, it has this dual nature of being a potential, blockbuster film, but
Yeah,
also something that can be, like you said, dissected and analyzed and
yeah,
studied, and
yeah.
I've certainly taken that route. My first viewing, I think, was much more uh, um, on an entertainment level,
Yeah, mine too. Yeah,
but but I started to ask questions, and especially near the end, and again that picture of Jack, from
right.
1921 in the ballroom scene, it these questions started to flood my mind. It's like, oh, this is not just entertainment. There's
Of
something
course,
to
of
to
course.
analyze here.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it's interesting that, yeah, to note just kind of the dual nature of the film. But what intrigues Kubrick about it? I don't know. I think one thing with him, because his films seem to go, like, he has uh such range with his work. I mean,
yes.
you look at 2001, you look at Barry Lyndon, and you look at Eyes Wide Shut, and you look at The Shining, and it's like you can't pin him down to one. Oh, he's this genre director.
Yeah, no,
I
no,
th- I
no,
think
not at all.
he I think he maybe had interest in just in kind of penetrating these different genres, or and a horror film was something that he hadn't kind of checked off the list. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's yeah, I'm sure that's up for interpretation.
yeah. We could only speculate, but um, I do really enjoy it. Like it's not one of my favorites of his, but I do really really enjoy the film. It's funny because of course you have the "Here's Johnny" line, which is probably the most famous line in the film. One of the most famous lines and images in cinema history is the "Here's
So
Johnny."
right,
There it
right
is.
there.
Yeah. But to me, when I watched it again yesterday, and I was bugging my wife because I kept saying it, to me, one of the lines that really stand out to me is when he's in the bathroom with with Grady, and the
Yeah,
line where he's like, "Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker." I just love that. And then he goes, "No, you've always been the caretaker,
always.
Mr. I love that. And that was another indication as to this being just like he's in hell. No, you have always been here, and
Well,
and you're gonna relive what you did over and over again in hell.
look at the color scheme in the bathroom. It is stark white
All
and
red.
bright red.
Yeah, yeah,
You have the what, the urinals and the maybe the counter that's white, but then it's just red.
yeah.
And then, of course, there's more connections with the color red, because we have, the opening of the elevator doors, that iconic imagery of the blood
The
rushing
blood.
out of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
of the elevator. And so, red obviously, is easy to peg as a symbol of,
Oh, of
death and,
course.
whatever. But
Yeah.
I think it works really well, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely,
yeah, and
absolutely.
yeah.
Do you?
Uh,
I'm curious what because this is a film that often, and some of Kubrick's films to an extent get this criticism, which is that the acting is over the top. Now, when I watch Nicholson in this, Yeah, I mean it's certainly broad, but I don't see that as a problem, because I think it's such a surreal, stylized film that he sort of makes that work. Like, I think if he was playing it straight and approaching it in a very truthful, realistic way, like he did brilliantly in the 70s in a lot of films,
Hmm.
and even later, like I know his acting really started to change in the 80s, but I think he still has a lot of feelings going on. It's just that he's sort of, everything he does is just broader, and I think, well, such an unnatural, it's not a literal film. Like, it is a surrealistic, however one may see it, fantasy horror film. To me, it totally works. I don't know how you feel about him in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see how it might be viewed as almost a caricature of madness,
Right, right.
where you do hit those high notes, so to speak. But I mean, you see notes of that in his performance in, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or you know other performances. But I mean, I think it works well for the film, and I think that was one of King's criticisms
Yeah,
on the film, was that it was overacted.
yeah.
And
A lot. Yeah, that
I
that is often, but again, I think, again, it's such a stylized film. I say, why not, right? If
Yeah, I don't personally take issue with it at
Neither do
all. In
I.
fact, I think it's one of the I think it's one of the iconic performances. I think this is one of the iconic American films. I mean, obviously, I have a long history with the film, and it's one that I absolutely love. But uh, I think it works well. Again, it's been a while since I've read the book, but I've read the book a couple of times, and I enjoy the book as well. But I
Right.
see them as different things. I had a different
For
experience
sure.
reading the book.
For sure.
And the book certainly, takes hold, uh, takes more firm hold of the supernatural end of things. I mean, in the book, we have, looking outside to the maze and things like that. We have topiary characters who, um, come to life, and so you can see immediately, that goes just a different direction. And then there's the made for TV version, which we won't discuss here. um but it certainly adapted. King, I believe, has said that that's his preferred version, because it adapts a lot closer
The book,
to
yeah.
to the source novel. And so, it's that's the beauty of film, and of subjectivity. It's, you take something, one way, I take it another way. I enjoy
Exactly.
the film. I enjoy the film immensely, and with all of its quirks and its, whatever. Yeah, it might show its cracks here and there. Um, but even that being said, for me, I mean, this is about as close as we get to a perfect horror film.
Yeah, yeah.
It's my favorite horror film of all time, no questions asked. Uh, but I understand, the differing opinions on the film as well. I
Yeah.
respect. In fact, I invite those differing opinions, because it creates great conversation.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I totally agree. But on the performances in the film, Shelley Duvall is incredible in this. I mean, in that,
Yeah,
and actually she is approached it very realistically. Like, she's not doing anything broad, and she didn't need to, because for so much of the film she's terrified. She's running, like she's running from him. She's rightfully, obviously terrified of how he's behaving. And it's a shame, of course, when you see the documentary by his daughter. You see the way Kubrick, it's well known that he treated her, he bullied her, which is terrible, to say. And I totally disagree when directors do that for the sake of her, whether he was doing that for the sake of her performance or not. I don't think that's creative, or positive. And also, it's a shame that she went through such hell on the film. And I know that even I'm sorry, I always forget his name, who played Dick.
Yeah, Scatman Crothers.
Scatman Crothers. There's a funny story, is because right after this he worked with Eastwood, or not long after this, and Eastwood would do just a couple of takes, and he'd be like, okay, we're done, and he started crying. He's like, thank you so much, I'm so grateful, because on Kubrick was like putting him through 80 takes, and I think he even started crying. But he is also amazing in this film, and just the to capture some of those reactions where it's just you alone, and for example, and Kubrick uses the zoom so beautifully. I know that these conversations, people often talk about the directors, but there's also, of course, we already talked about the Steadicam operator Garrett Brown, and the DOP is John Alcott, who did Clockwork. Sorry, no, he didn't. He worked on Clockwork Orange, but he was, or was he the? No, he wasn't the DOP on that, I don't believe.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't. I know he worked on it, but yeah, John Alcott was the DOP.
Yep.
And those zooms are so incredible. Like he either goes so fast, and like the guy in the teddy bear outfit giving the guy the blowjob, or slow,
or Danny in the game room, when it zooms really quickly on him, and then we pan over to see the twins. That was another really quick zoom.
And it's freaky, and it just it goes right to the gut. But then he goes so slow into Dick's face, and you see him suddenly, because of these communications, these shinings that he can have with Danny, that there's trouble is brewing over at the hotel, and just the look of fear on his eyes. It's so good. It's so good. I mean, he was incredible, I thought.
I agree. I really like Scatman's performance, and I think to kind of go comment back on Shelley Duvall. I agree. I'm not totally okay with what went down on the set. I mean, she's clearly traumatized, and Vivian Kubrick's making of that you alluded to, the documentary really highlights that.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And you can see Kubrick just really kind of openly annoyed with her.
Yeah.
He
was an asshole.
I grit my teeth a little bit watching that, like, ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, she gives a wonderful performance.
She's amazing.
And her performance is it's so grounded in reality, just again, because she's kind of exterior to a lot of what's going on, because she doesn't possess the shining, or she's on the outside of all of this, and so she's just naturally a lot more grounded in reality. But then when the tide turns and she sees there's the bear suit thing, and then there's the she sees the skeletons and the hotel all of a sudden start to shift,
or even all the what Jack has been writing over and over again, which is what is it? All fun and no play makes Jack a dull boy, I believe.
Yeah, well, right. And Kubrick had an assistant that spent months.
I read that.
months typing those out, because as she's thumbing through those papers, it's like, there's different formats on every. That had to be. It's not CGI, folks.
No.
That was all hand. I'm like,
that's
wow,
incredible.
That's commitment to detail that you find with Kubrick. I mean, he is a perfectionist. Well, and it's funny because they, Garrett Brown in the commentary, he brought up that, and I'm looking at my notes here, that Kubrick was more of an artisan than he was a filmmaker in a way, because he, just polished and perfected these shots down to, he molded these into exactly what he wanted to see. And, Garrett Brown was also saying, because he was able to perfect his craft because Kubrick had them shooting this so many times, that he would get down to, okay, if I take an extra half step here with the Steadicam, I'm going to achieve this effect. And it's just, you get that granular because you're shooting this many times. And so I think it's interesting though to yeah, think of Kubrick as more of an artist than a filmmaker. I think that's an interesting thought.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I'm sure that because the Steadicam was just made just a few years or so before,
In the
right? So he in
70s.
the 70s, so he was able to practice
Yeah.
on this film
Yeah.
by just doing and learning about it and discovering new things. So I hadn't thought of it. That's actually a really, really good point. The other bit of trivia that made me laugh was, as you know, Kubrick was shooting, constantly, and for well over a year on this film, to the point where Nicholson, being such a big tennis fan, there was like, because there was some tennis tournament going on in England, and he wanted to go see it, so he lied that he had a back injury. So, and
Oh,
then apparently then Kubrick was watching it, and they cut to Nicholson
oh
watching it,
no.
and Kubrick was furious that he did that. I thought that was hilarious. I wonder what
Oh,
that conversation was like afterwards. Like,
oh, that's funny. I didn't. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
always learning new little bits of trivia about the film, and that's not one that I had heard. Yeah, and I know Jack Nicholson had intentionally wanted to stay uh, the hotel that he was in. Like he intentionally had that really far away from the set, so he had to drive in every day, and they were commenting on how he would show up on set at call time, whatever, and he would have slept in the car ride on the way there, and so he's very kind of groggy
yeah,
on set, and that
yeah.
actually
And
came
he has
through,
that look. Yeah,
and yeah, and it came through in his performance. And I thought that's interesting as well,
yeah,
and I guess he had some things going on in his personal life, and so that kind of showed through a little bit in his performance. But and I know I'm not an actor, but I know I'm sure there's so many elements that come into play in any performance, elements that people are completely unaware of that
yeah,
just
yeah.
end
Well, the
up kind of
subconscious takes
yeah.
over sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's interesting, and Jack Nicholson is just he's endlessly interesting
Oh, I
to begin
agree.
with.
I
But
agree.
yeah, I mean, just obviously, yeah, love this film. Yeah, I have to mention this before we're done here, is that the 4K transfer
Oh,
looks absolutely phenomenal. I'm new to the 4K game.
right.
I In fact, it was an upgrade last year, like equipment wise, that I went to 4K, and this is one of the best discs I've seen on the format. So
Oh, I bet. I bet. Yeah. No, it's a wonderful film, and like I said, every time I see his films, there's so much more to discover and so many questions to ask and consider. Can you tell us a little bit about what your YouTube channel is about?
yeah, so uh, previously I was known as Cartoon Fortress.
Right.
This is dating back to, and it's funny because I do some independent illustration work and stuff like that, and so I had originally actually started social media and things like that to promote my artwork, and that very quickly turned into film collecting and criticism and things like that. So I rebranded. When was that last? I guess that was last year, to Film Collector Archive, because I'm trying to call it what it is. This is a channel about film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can find me at Film Collector Archive on YouTube, also on Instagram, and then I'm also on Letterboxd. I don't know how much of your audience is Letterbox people, but I'm on there
I
as
just got on that back in January. I love Letterbox.
oh, it's yeah, it's the app I really can't live without. I love
Right.
Letterboxd, but I'm on there as FC Archive.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect.
Um, so if anyone, I love interacting with the film collecting community, and yeah, so that's kind of the three main spots I can be found.
Okay, great. Well, I'll leave the links in the description box down below where people can follow David on social media, and also check out his great YouTube channel. He's got an incredible physical media collection. So I highly recommend going to his channel, subscribe, likes, comments, everything. So David, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate that you took the time to talk about The Shining in depth. So please come again. Let's do it again sometime.
Oh yes, please, sir. Anytime you want to talk film, I'm up for it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of my YouTube channel and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found, youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you are interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is bonus content that I create month in and month out, and it is based on polls that I put out at the beginning of every single month, which as a member, you will very much have access to vote on. So if you like my work and you're interested in supporting me over on Patreon, head over to the link for full details. I also want to mention that you can leave a donation to my YouTube channel at kofi.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. It's very easy to do so, and I will leave the link in the description box below. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You can see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.